Reynaldo López and Aaron Bummer both signed new deals over the weekend in a win-win for the player and the organization. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Monday, November 4th. Your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. Follow me on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. He's Christian Rauh, Christian S. Rauh, R-A-U-H on the Twitter machine. You can follow the show on Twitter, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and an Instagram as well. And you can find all of our written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack. And Christian, a lot of stuff to get to. We pushed the mailbag from Friday to today because of a lot of news that happened over the weekend or that happened on Thursday. We'll get to the mailbag in the second half. We're going to talk about the qualifying offer decision, the details of that when it pertains to Max Fried and all of that. But before we get there, Reynaldo López and Aaron Bummer signed new deals over the weekend. And not a lot of material changes to this. A lot of, for these guys, for the most part, the CBT salary is the same and things like that. But it is wins for both players and the organization. And that's not something you see a lot in baseball. So let's break down what happened here. Reynaldo López signed a new 3-year contract over the weekend. And reminder, he had signed a previous one, $30 million over 3. New deal, no new money. Because in that old deal, his salaries were $8 million for last year, 11 and 11, and then a club option in 2027 for $8 million. This one, $8 million, $14 million, and $8 million with no club option in 2027. They have, in essence, he's still getting $30 million over 3 years, but they have guaranteed that club option. So rather than him having to wonder, am I going to have a contract for 2027? He knows for a fact he has it, and he knows exactly what he's getting paid. So makes sense. It's a win for the player, right? For the team, and this is what's interesting. The salaries, the distribution per season is different. It's $8 million now in 2025 versus 11. And the next year is 14 versus 11. So they're freeing up some money in 2025. It makes sense this is a win for everybody, right? But do you think that this is just moving money around to be prepared, or do you think that AA has something up his sleeve he's going to do here?
Oh, you got to think he's got something up his sleeve. You have to think that's the case. Look at where we were at the trade deadline this past season. We were talking about how the Braves were stuck for cash, having a tough time with cash. Those $3 million at next trade deadline, or even just this offseason, could change the way that maybe you get the top position player compared to the second best position player in a group. That $3 million could change. I don't know if it's that much.
Okay.
Don't get me
In
wrong.
a group.
Just for an example period. Yeah.
I was about to jump in and you said in a group, and I'm like, okay, you don't mean in general, because the number one position player is Juan Soto, and I think we're all agreed that's not happening in Atlanta.
Oh, yeah, no.
He's a Scott Boras client, but you mean the guy in a certain position. Okay, that's different. Sorry, go ahead.
No worries. But yeah, when you look at the little extra little teeny things, these are the details that you should be paying attention to when you're talking about how Alex deals with business. And I do think this is pretty important to pay attention to. And it's awesome for Lopez as well, because you're getting another guaranteed year on the back of his contract. He had a great year. He deserves it. Going from a reliever to a starter and probably going to be a crucial part of your pitching staff moving forward, having him through 2027, I think is huge for the organization. And I love the fact that there's some extra money for this offseason, because Alex is going to cook, Lindsay. He's going to. That's just what he does.
He's got something planned. We don't know what it is, but that's how Alex Anthopoulos works. We never know anything's coming until it's dropped by the organization, that blue box of text. I always love that. The other deal that happened at the same time, Aaron Bummer has signed a new 2-year deal. So when you inherited Aaron Bummer, when you acquired Aaron Bummer from the Chicago White Sox, his deal had 2 club options attached to it. The way that it worked was when he signed the deal with the White Sox, it was 5 years, $16 million. This was a $7.25 million option for 2025. There was a buyout attached to that. And then there was another club option for 2026 at, I believe it was the same amount for both, 7.25 million for each. This new deal is 13 million over 2 years, 3.5 million in 25, 9.5 million in 2026. So I argue it's still a win for both the team and the organization because Aaron Bummer goes from 2 club options, and I believe the second one didn't have a buyout, to 2 guaranteed years. So yes, he goes from 14.5 million guaranteed to 13 million, but he's guaranteed a contract the next 2 seasons. So I argue it's a win there. And then for Atlanta, they did the same thing where they moved just under $4 million from 2024 over to 2025. I'm sorry, from 25 to 26, because his salary goes from 7.25 to 3.5 in 25. So again, they're moving some money back from 25 to 26.
Just putting some kindle on the fire. That's what he's doing. I'm telling you, it's exciting.
I've written this, I feel like, so many different places. You've got to use Aaron Bummer more than you've been using Aaron Bummer.
Yes.
That a lot of the issues that you've seen with Aaron Bummer's performance and his conventional statistics haven't been his fault. His ERA last year, 3.58. His fielding independent pitching, which takes out the impacts of the defense and is just things he can control, was 2.23, right? He would have been one of the best pitchers in baseball with a consistent performing defense behind him, right? It was like a 1 1/3 runs different between his ERA and his fielding independent pitching. He gave up 2 homers all season in 55 1/3 innings. He, I think, was second in baseball. I want to say behind, was it Luke Weaver somebody from in the World Series. He was second in baseball in ground balls. He barely allowed any barrels. Like, he did his job. And that's why they identified to go get him from the White Sox in the first place. In 2023, his ERA was almost 7. It was 6.79 with the White Sox. But his fielding independent pitching was 3.58. It was over 3 runs better. So that's why they went to get him. You saw it come up again. Here's the thing, though, and here's the caveat I want to give everybody. Sorry, before I do that, am I wrong for liking Aaron Bummer, for thinking we should use him more? Or is this just one of those, he's probably always going to run a higher ERA than FIP because he's a ground ball guy?
No, I don't think you are. Look, I think where we're at with this show right now, with today, I think we need to pull up the chairs, bring in the coffee and the donuts, because I think this is an AA appreciation show, Lindsay. I really do. When you look at this, what we've seen with Lopez and with Bummer, I really love that both these guys have come in. When you think about this in a big picture scheme,
right?
Lopez for $8 million in 2025, $3.5 million for Bummer in 2025, you're talking less than $12 million for both these players who are going to be crucial parts of your pitching staff next season. If both of these players went to free agency, both of them would probably would easily get more than what they're getting in 2025. I think Bummer would make more than $3.5 million. I know Lopez would make more than $8 million in 2025. AA absolutely cooked. But when you're talking about Bummer, no, he needs to be used more. We talked about it over and over all season long. And I think now that you have him for 2 more seasons, you're going to see that happen a little bit more because you have a solidified plan. And I think you're going to see Bummer be a solid 6th, 7th inning guy from here moving forward. And that's a great thing to have for the Braves. That's a great thing. Him being one of the first guys out of the pen, because when he did come out, he was great. And his ERA might be a little high. That's fine. I have no problem with that. I really don't.
That's why I like having you as a co-host, because I hadn't thought about the fact that, a 30-year-old pitcher coming off an all-star year with a 1.99 ERA in 135 innings and 25 starts would go for more than $8 million in free agency. I would argue he would be between 15 and 20 million bucks on the free agency market right now on a single season salary if you were to sign him. So the fact you have him for 3 additional years at a total of 30 million is awesome. I do want to caution some people here that it's not a guarantee Atlanta's going to go out and make a big signing, right? We all expect them to. I feel like every year there's one kind of not big, but there's one sort of outside signing that they make. One year it was bringing back Marcelo Zuna. They went out and got Lopez last year. There's always some sort of guy they add in free agency. But you do have, you freed up some cash for 25. but you do also have some increasing salaries. So a lot of the dead money you took on to get Jared Kelenic is off the books. David Fletcher is still here, $6.5 million. That's a buried salary in the minors. I have a question about him in the mailbag. We'll get to him later. Charlie Morton's $20 million is gone. Max Fried's $15 million is gone. Jorge Soler's $13 million is gone off the books for this year. Griffin Canning could cost you $5 million. We'll see what happens there. But you do have some salaries that increase this year. So you do have, you can't just add all that up and say this is how much Atlanta has to spend this year, because you do have some salaries that go up. Sean Murphy goes from 9 to 15. I still think he can be much better than you've seen outside of the first half of 23. And we talked about that in the show. I talked about that in the show last week. Chris Sale actually costs money now, right? His salary was covered by Boston last year, but he cost you $22 million this year. Spencer Strider goes from $1 million to $4 million. And so accounting for all of the arbitration options and the club options, and again, the deadline on the club options is 5 p.m. today. We'll get notice of that probably between when I record this show and when it drops. That's how this works. Your salary commitments are $195.6 million, and your CBT, your luxury tax, is $210. Now, we expect some guys to not get options exercised. Is it Luke Jackson? Is he the only one, or do you see them not picking up somebody else this afternoon?
I think Luke Jackson is a pretty much guarantee in my mind, but it's tough. I know that the Braves don't like using options, period, and that's, at the beginning of the show, that's why
they're fine with a club option. They just don't want to give you an option. There's no player options, but
that's
club
fair.
options.
No, that's fair overall. I think overall the least organizations use options, period.
Yeah,
but I think Luke Jackson's the guarantee one for me. I don't know if we'll see other ones get denied. I would go out on a limb and say no. I think the only one will be Luke Jackson when it's all said and done.
Yeah, and for the record, I totally think that they could bring him back. I just don't think it's going to be on the option. So what it is here is he has a $7 million club option for next year. The buyout is, I think it's $2 million. I don't see him being worth $7.5 million, whatever it ends up being. So I could see them declining that, paying the buyout, and then offering him a minor league deal or a smaller deal to come back. I just don't see them paying all that money for that. The rest of them, I expect Travis d'Arnaud to get picked up. I expect Marcell Ozuna to get picked up. Obviously, Aaron Bummers is now gone. You can also see maybe some non-tenders. We talked about Griffin Canning. Do they tender him? Kevin Biggio is already elected free agency. He's not an option. You got to figure out, do you pick up Ramon Laureano now that Soler's gone and things like that? That deadline is November 22nd at 7 p.m. Eastern. So if you remember last year, there was that big trade for Aaron Bummer that went down either the day before or hours before the deadline last year, where they moved a lot of arbitration guys and non-tender candidates. Michael Soroka, who I would not be opposed to bringing back as a free agent. He actually looked pretty good in relief at the end of the year. Would not be opposed to bringing him back as a free agent, as a reliever, to see if you can work on him as a starter. We'll see what happens. But is there anybody in that non-tender list that you think could be on the chopping block outside of the obvious one we've already talked about?
It's tough. I don't think I can have another name personally. I think Luke Jackson is just that guy for me.
Yeah. Dylan Lee feels like he's going to come back. You're going to bring back Jared Kelenic.
I like Lee. Yeah, I love
Dylan
and
Lee.
I think Kelenic is a good one to keep on too. I know that he didn't have the best season, but what you traded for him, I think Jackson's the only guy.
Yeah, like not doing the option on him for the non-tender deadline. And we'll go over this again when we get closer to the non-tender deadline. But Eli White's a pretty slam dunk to bring him back. Wasker, he doesn't have options left, but he can be a reliever. I think you can bring him back as long as he's healthy. I do think, yeah. The other moves that were made, just want to make sure we covered this real quick. They added 2 guys to the 40-man roster. Domingo Gonzalez, they selected him out of AAA. They were protecting him from minor league free agency. He would have been eligible for minor league free agency had they not done that. 38.8% strikeout rate as a reliever last year, 10% walk rate. You feel like they're going to give him a look in spring training. And then Royber Salinas, the right-hand pitcher, is back from the Oakland A's. He was part of the Sean Murphy deal. I don't know if he's going to be a reliever or a back-end starting option. Obviously, he'll be in the minors. Now, the only player left on the A's roster from that deal is Esteury Ruiz. So not a great deal for them. Worked out for Atlanta to get Sean Murphy. But they brought both those guys back. The 40-man roster, today is the deadline. You have to bring back all your injured players as well. So Ray Kerr, Angel Perdomo, Spencer Strider, Huascar was on the 60-day, Ronald Acuna Jr. on the 60-day. But you still project as of now to be under 40 men on the 40-man roster after doing all that. So if there's anybody you want to protect from the Rule of 5 draft, which I don't think there is, you have the flexibility to do that. So that'll happen today.
What is it with the Braves getting players back after they trade them? It seems like it happens so many times. You know what? They must send them off with a fruit basket before going to their new team. That must be the case because they love coming back to this organization.
In Roy Williams' defense, he had no say in this. He was waivers.
Yeah.
But so much of this, I think that this is the core advantage of the Atlanta Braves. Right? This is the fact that they are like the organization treats their players, management treats their players like being here. And being the hub of the South, a lot of the players from the South live in or near Atlanta. And so like I think you're probably coming up on the very end of the wave of players who grew up watching TBS, but you still have a lot of people who grow up in the South who are Braves fans almost by default. And I think this is one of those things that you see where these guys enjoy their time in Atlanta and they may move on their own volition, not their own volition, but when they have a chance to come back, they want to come back because they like it here. So this is one of the competitive advantages that Atlanta has. You don't see guys doing this to go to Philly. You don't see guys falling in love and wanting to go back to the Mets organization when they get released. You see this in Atlanta because it's an organization that's well run, treats their players well, and people like being here, like being in that clubhouse. So I think that's a competitive advantage the Braves have. In just a second, we're going to get into your mailbag questions. We had time for just about 3, 4, maybe 5 of them. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby, Christian Rauh, talking about, we covered some of those contracts over the weekend. Now we want to get to your questions that you had for us. The first one was from Aussie Fan, left us over on the Substack. Longtime listener, reader, loved Aussie Fan here. Says he asked about David Fletcher as a backup infielder and a part-time starter as a knuckleballer to save the rotation and bullpen. What's the plausibility of that? Is that really a crazy idea? And I think the issue here, and correct me if I'm wrong, Christian, but the issue here is skill-wise, he's not that great anymore, or he wasn't last year. And then the rules get in the way. Do you have the stats there to explain how rough he's been as a knuckleballer and as a hitter?
Yeah, 232 in the minors last year, hitting wise, isn't the best. And I think it was 218 in AA Mississippi. He only had a couple games there because he was focused on pitching. But in his pitching time, 3.37, 6.37 ERA, 37 walks, 32 strikeouts, and he allowed 12 home runs. So I think obviously it was a work in progress. There's no doubt about that.
He was learning to be a knuckleballer for the first time, right?
And it's a hard thing to do. Even big knuckleballers like Matt Waldron, who just picked up that pitch, but is doing it in the major leagues now for the San Diego Padres. He's gone out in interviews and talked about the first couple of times that he used it in the minor leagues. He was getting completely blown up, and he finally figured it out and took him a very long time to do. So that it's one of those pitches that you either have it or you don't, but it's going to take quite some time to have it. So I think that there's still some, the jury's still out, I guess you can say, on Fletcher being a pitcher, but I just don't think it's enough for the major league talent. I do think that you have to give him a look in spring training as an infielder just because of his salary, just because of his contract with the dead money, just to see if he can make his way back on as a utility man for the roster, because you're just wasting him down there with the $6.5 million he has to be spent. So
$6.5 million. I think if nothing else, you're showcasing him for a potential trade, right? You just want somebody to need some infield help and be willing to pick him up. And I just think
good point.
It's probably not going to happen, but you would love if it could. I do think the other issue here with this is the rules, right? You do have usage rules. He's not listed as a two-way player, or he's not officially a two-way player. So because of that, he can't come into pitch unless you're leading by 10 in the 9th, trailing by at least 8 at any time, or it's extra innings. And to get two-way player status, you can't just declare he's a two-way player. in the current season or the previous season, a position player had to have pitched 20 MLB innings to get to a player status. So you can't have him be your starter until he's pitched 20 innings in relief for you, and you can't use him in relief except in those specific situations. I haven't gone back to check, but I would imagine it would have taken probably all season. If you threw him in every one of those situations, probably would have taken all season just to get him to a player status. And the fact that he has a club option for 26 that they're going to decline and let him go, he won't even get to a player status until the end of the year. So you can't necessarily use him in that way. But Dustin on Twitter did ask, do the Braves continue with the 6-man rotation next year? On that note, and I absolutely think you do, because you still have a lot of the same workload concerns with these guys, right? Grant Holmes is converting to a starter. He'll be a starter for the first time in a long time. So you'll have workload questions there. Schwellenbach had a career high in innings this year, but he didn't have the history of the workload. Chris Sale's still going to have the injury questions. Reynaldo López still went on the IL multiple times. If Ian Anderson's in your rotation, he's coming back from Tommy John without a full workload. You'll still have a lot of workload issues. So it feels like no matter what, you're going to have to go with a 6-man rotation. I think, Christian, the big question is, how do you configure who's that 6th man? And is it somebody you can stash in the bullpen, or like, do you just run a man short in the bullpen?
Yeah, I think a 6-man rotation makes a lot of sense for the Braves next season. And I think it sets you up for a great way to bring in spot starts from the minor leagues. We saw it last year happen with plenty of players. Now, they all didn't work out, but I think a guy like
most of them didn't work out.
Most of them. But I think a guy like Waldrop can make a bounce back, and I think we will see that from him. Smith Shawver, I think we'll see some starts from him. Maybe Bryce Elder. I had to bring that in, since I had to bring his name in at least once on this show today.
Yeah.
If he returns for the Braves. But no, I do think that a 6-man rotation would make a lot of sense. And you bring up the biggest reason why, because of the concerns of the usage. Yeah, I think Strider's the biggest one that we need to pay attention to.
I didn't even mention Strider. Yeah, he didn't have a workload this year.
Yeah, and coming off his all the things and the injuries that he's having, we don't know exactly when he's going to be available. If it's the beginning of the season, if it's June, July, we're not really sure at this moment in time. But when he is ready, you have to think that moving to a 6-man rotation to start the season will initially help right off the bat and make sure that he's not being overused moving forward. The 162 games is a very long season, Lindsay. I think we've seen that for quite some time. And the Braves, I think, know that you have to have absolute depth to make sure that you can get through 162 games. It almost didn't work this season to get to the postseason, and they've made it happen. But having a 6-man rotation will definitely help. So I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, they had two players break 170 innings in Sale and Fried, and they had one guy break 160 in Morton. And then Lopez was at 135. Schwellenbach was at 123. I think at most you're counting for 160 from any of those guys next year. And
Canning threw that many. I know that we haven't talked about Canning. We don't know if he's going to stick around, but he pitched that many innings last season.
He's definitely an option. Yeah. All right, let's rapid fire a little bit on some of these, because we got I think 5 minutes left in the show. Do the Braves, this is also from Dustin, do the Braves consider trading Raisel Iglesias, who's in the final year of his deal, or do they extend him? For me personally, I think it depends on the offseason. If you find a guy you think can be your next closer, then you might do something where you bring back Iglesias, like a 1-year deal with an option. That way, if that guy's not ready, I like Jose Leclerc. If you go for a free agent, I think he should be rather affordable. Sign him to a multi-year deal and groom him to be back into a closing role. Maybe Hurst and Waldrop if they stick internal. But I don't think there's any way they trade Raisel Iglesias, simply because AA is not in the habit of subtracting key pieces from the major league roster for an upgrade.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't think they trade him. It'll be interesting to see what they do in the offseason next year with Iglesias, to see if they're going to continue and keep him. But I do also like Leclerc. I think that's an interesting piece. He didn't have the best season with the Rangers last year. Obviously fell out of the closing role. But if you could find a way to fix him, and the Braves are very good at doing something like that, not putting him in high leverage roles to start off, because you don't have to have him in a high leverage role because you have a guy like Iglesias, I think that could be pretty huge. Have him around the same type of leverage that you use Aaron Bummer around, and you can get him on the cheap. That might be pretty fun to watch. I like Jose Leclerc. That's a good name. Good name drop.
Yep. Thank you. All right. Looking at questions We have 3 questions here from Jacob. First one, who is the MVP of the team next year? Love this question. I guess you go first.
Oh man, that's a good one. I have to go with Matt Olson. He's gone 162 games, what, 3 years in a row now?
Yeah.
It's insane. And I know he didn't have the best year this year when it comes to home runs. Not many Braves did, with the exception of Ozuna, but he still found a way to almost hit 30 home runs, almost got 100 RBIs. I think when you get the rest of his supporting cast back with Acuna and having Albies back full speed, having Harris back full speed for the beginning of the season and for hopefully the long term of the season, I think that will benefit Olson as well. So I'm going to go with Matt Olson. I think he's going to have a bounce back year. Let's go ahead and throw a hot take out here and say that he gets back to 40 home runs in 2025.
I've got the Austin Riley revenge tour, right? He only got 110 games because of the injury, hit 19 home runs, but he's coming off of 3 consecutive years where he hit 30 plus home runs, including 38 and 37 in 22 and 23, and was just shy of 100 RBI. I have him as a 4,100 guy next year. He's coming in with a vengeance. He now has the biggest contract, I think, in team history because his surpassed Olson's for biggest contract as far as total money. Nobody's over 22 million, folks, but most money long term. I have Austin Riley going 40, 100 next year and being the team's MVP. And I'll remind you, he had 3 consecutive top 7 finishes in MVP in 21, 22, and 23. 7th, 6th, and
I hope
7th.
we're both.
Yeah, I think both those guys could finish in the top 5 on this. So I definitely hope it happens. All right, another question from Jacob here. Is Strider going to regress significantly after 2 major elbow surgeries? And I struggle with this one because, yes, it was a major surgery. It wasn't a full Tommy John. It was the internal brace. But I think the thing about Spencer Strider is he's so analytical. He understands all of the super deep pitching nerd stuff that I think you may see him come back a little bit later than we expect. I don't think it's going to be like July or anything, but I think that Spencer Strider is the kind of guy who, rather than come in April and say get shelled in the month of April while he's working things out, may wait to come back until May. But I think when he comes back, he would be at least 90% of himself. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like he's the kind of guy who's not going to come back until he knows, hey, I can be close to what I was, and he understands the physical requirements to get there from a mechanic standpoint, from a stuff standpoint.
Overall, I think that's the right thing to do with his career, because I don't think 1 month of extra Spencer Strider is worth what we should be seeing the next 6-7 years of this guy. He's going to still be just fine. I can see the concern, and I don't have any extra notes to add to what you just said, but I could totally see the concern, thinking that there's going to be some type of regression. So I don't blame you for asking this question, but I do think that he's going to be fine. And that's just a gut feeling, just an intuition, because what we've seen from him over the years. And even though it's his second one, he didn't seem to have too much of a concern when he returned the first time around.
Yeah. All right. Final question here. And I think he put this at me because I did a prospect thing with Chris Clegg at the Dynasty Dugout. What young arm steps up next year? I don't think we'll see anybody, just clarifying, I don't think we'll see anybody pull a Spencer Schwellenbach and come up and throw 120 innings and be awesome like that.
That's a good thing if we don't, by the way.
Yeah, we have so many rotation options that if we don't get a young dude who has to come up and throw 120 innings, it means their existing options did well. But I do have 3 guys I think we should watch for that could potentially make an impact next year. First one's Drew Hackenberg. To me, he is the platonic ideal of a sinker slider guy. It's a really good sinker, really good slider. He can throw other fastballs. He can get swings and miss if he needs to. Finished the year in AAA, went 7-5 with 144 strikeouts and 129 innings. Walked 62, so the walks are a bit of a concern, but I think he got better towards the end of the year there. Lucas Braun, dude, just 8 innings. He averaged like 6 innings per start last year. Finished in AAA also, 25 starts, 129 innings. Struck out 1. Nope, wrong list there. 143 innings and 24 starts, 3.26 ERA, 162 strikeouts to 42 walks and 143 innings. Throws a lot of stuff. Fastball, sweeper, curveball, changeup. I really like the sweeper. Not a lot of sweepers on Atlanta's roster. I think the only starter who had one was Max Fried. And then limited impact. I don't think he can go 120 innings, but Blake Burkhalter. He was one of the guys you got with one of the comp picks. I think he was the Freddie Freeman comp pick. He was the Freddie Freeman comp pick after Freddie Freeman left. Finished in high A because he had Tommy John in 23, but 3-3, 271 ERA in 14 starts, 63 strikeouts to 16 walks. Fastball, cutter, changeup, converted reliever, pounds the zone. I think he'd make a great setup man at the next level, but he's been working as a starter. He's gone deep into games. He had a 7-inning complete game. I like him a lot. He's the guy I think could make an AJ Smith-Shawver type leap from high A all the way to debuting by May. I just don't know how many innings he can throw at the major league level because he only got 69 and 2/3 this year after Tommy John. But those are my 3 prospects to watch for as we enter the year to make a major league impact.
Those are some good ones right there. I don't have much to add on that statistically. But I will say there's one player that I want to see more of. I don't think he's going to make a big step, but I want to see more of our former first round pick, Cam Kennedy. He only had 3 innings in 2024. I want to see how many levels he goes in 2025. I know he's still young, still
He's
a lot of
super
room to grow,
young.
but he's so fun to watch.
A lot of teams have taken those prep guys and they leave them in single A the entire season. He feels like he's good enough to do a single A to high A thing. So we'll see what happens. Can he make it to Rome? Does he stay in Augusta the whole year? I don't think he gets past Rome, but I do think Caminiti has the stuff to be really interesting. I want to see what his changeup looks like. I've heard it's really good. He didn't throw a ton of them when he finally made his debut, but it was so long after his high school season ended that I get it. A changeup's a field pitch. Curious to see what he looks like, but I am excited to see Caminiti and Herrick Hernandez, the draftee. I think he's a Spencer Strider starter kit, that fastball slider combination from a shorter guy. I want to see if he can get more extension on that release to have a little better perceived velocity on the fastball. This has been Braves Today for Monday, November 4th. If you're listening on audio, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and then also leave a 5-star review. That helps other folks discover the channel and learn about Braves Today. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.